Hello and welcome to the new Vauxhall Insignia Country Tourer. And I'll start by saying that I feel like I've spent quite a decent amount of time with the new Insignia over the last 9 months or so. Now first, Vauxhall launched a new Insignia Grand Sport, replacing the old Insignia. And it was longer than the old Insignia, wider than the old Insignia. But crucially, it was 10% lighter than the old car as well. And 10% is a huge amount of weight to carry out of any car. But a big saloon, that's massive. That's a huge amount of weight to shed. And then Vauxhall launched the Insignia Sports Tourer, the estate version, and now they've launched this, the Country Tourer. This is a slightly more outdoorsy version. Not only can you get it with all-wheel drive, but it's also got better ground clearance. It rides about 2 centimetres taller than the standard Sports Tourer. So think of it as a rival for an Audi A4 all-road. But whereas the A4 costs just under £38,000, this, with all-wheel drive, costs just under £28,000. £10,000 less. 10,000. Now the first thing I noticed, apart from the fact that it's a very big car and this one doesn't have a reversing camera, which is great, is the fact that it just rides very smoothly. It's surprisingly comfortable, and actually I think it probably rides slightly better than the standard Sports Tourer. Now as I said, you can get this car with all-wheel drive, and if you do, you get torque vectoring. So as soon as the sensors detect that the conditions are slightly slippery and you need a bit more traction, it'll start moving the power around. So if I'm turning into a left-hand corner, it'll move the power to the outside rear wheel to give me a slightly better turn-in, and you can feel that working. Yes, I mean, of course you can get it to understeer if you really want to, but you can just feel the system working. When it is slightly slippery, when the roads are greasy, you can feel it just moving the power around, and it's actually quite reassuring. Now the steering, although you can't really feel that much, it's nicely weighted and it responds quite well. And you can change the weight of the steering by a couple of little buttons down here just in front of the gear lever. And that will change not just the weight of the steering, but it will change the throttle response, it will change how the ESP behaves, and it will change how the dampers behave too. You've got a Tour button and you've got a Sport button, and in between those two you've got a standard mode. And basically they're on a scale of how sharp and how heavy do you want the steering to be and how responsive do you want the throttle to be. Tour, it's at its laziest, most relaxed mode, so the steering is quite light, the throttle response is not that responsive. Whereas at the other end, you've got Sport, that's when the throttle is at its sharpest and the steering is at its heaviest. So if you're exploring the countryside and you want a nice, relaxing drive in your Country Tourer, then you would select Tour. If you're in a bit of a hurry, that's when you press Sport. As for gearboxes, you can either get an 8-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual. And this has got the 6-speed manual, and it's okay. The clutch is quite on-off, the gearbox itself is a little bit rubbery, but it's alright. It's not the best, it's not the worst. Finally, engines. And you can only get 2 engines in the Country Tourer. You can get a 2-litre single-turbo diesel with 170 brake horsepower, or you can get a 2-litre twin-turbo diesel with 210 brake horsepower. Now this is a single-turbo 170 brake horsepower diesel engine, so 170 brake horsepower, 295 foot-pounds of torque, 0 to 62 miles an hour in 9.3 seconds and a top speed of 135. And actually it feels a little bit quicker than that. Keep it between 1700 RPM and 3,500 RPM and it picks up pretty well. And it uses quite a bit less fuel than I imagined it would as well. I did about 100 miles before the needle even dropped below full, so it's quite good. If you don't get the all-wheel drive system, it's actually slightly faster and it's more economical as well, so you'll get 53 miles to the gallon rather than 43 miles to the gallon, and you'll save yourself £2,000. It's just under 26 grand rather than 28. But if you don't get the all-wheel drive system, what's the point? What's the point of not getting all-wheel drive on the model that is supposed to be more outdoorsy? That's the reason why it's got a slightly higher ride height. Just doesn't make sense. So get it with the all-wheel drive system. All things considered, although it's slightly taller than the Sports Tourer and it isn't as sleek as the Sports Tourer, especially with those black bits of plastic all over the bodywork, it's still good. I think it surprised me a little, because on face value it is just an estate car that rides slightly higher, it's got all-wheel drive, it's got some black plastic on it. But that all-wheel drive system, the way it can find grip where you don't think it will, combined with the fact that it corners slightly flatter than you'd imagine, it is a surprising package. It's not exciting, but it's definitely surprised me. because I thought it would just be the poor relation to the Sports Tourer, and I don't think it is. The Grand Sport drives well, the Sports Tourer drives well, and I think this does too.